Hey everyone, here is lecture 2 in our behaviorism unit. Our first lecture was over classical conditioning and talking about Pavlov and Watson and the involuntary reflexive responses that we create with classical conditioning. Today we're going to talk about operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning was really studied by a guy named B.F. Skinner. And what B.F. Skinner did was he built on what's known as the law of effect. And the concept of the law of effect is we are going to essentially continue behaviors that are rewarded and stop behaviors that are punished. And so operant conditioning operates under this idea that we learn from consequences. That's what it's all about. It's not this involuntary reflexive behavior like we see in classical. Instead, with operant conditioning, we have choice. With operant conditioning, we have the choice to either continue behaviors that may result in a reward of some kind, or maybe we want to avoid behaviors because we want to avoid the negative consequences that may happen. That said, we all can think of plenty of examples where we are aware of an award that could happen, but we still choose not to do that behavior. Maybe you are aware that if you study really hard, you may pass a test, but you choose not to study. We're also aware of times when there may be consequences, but negative consequences, but we still choose to do those behaviors. Maybe you know that if you sneak out of the house, there's a good chance you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get grounded, but you sneak out of the house anyway. So with operant conditioning, there's more choice involved. What you have on the screen now are some different types of conditioning. And there's really two questions that you should ask yourself to try to figure out what type of conditioning it's going to be. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is, are you trying to increase or decrease the target behavior? If you are increasing or strengthening a target behavior, then we call that reinforcement. And the second question you want to ask yourself is, are you adding something or are you taking something away? If you're adding something, we would consider that positive. And if you're taking something away, we call that negative. I forgot to mention, sorry, with number one there, if you're increasing or decreasing behavior, obviously if you're increasing, that is reinforcement. If you're decreasing the target behavior, that's going to be considered punishment. And then from there, we just make combinations with these two questions. So maybe you are adding something to try to increase a behavior. You give a child a piece of candy when they correctly solve a math problem. Well, you're giving them something that makes it positive, and you're trying to increase that target behavior that makes it reinforcement, positive reinforcement. Maybe you tell a child that if they get all A's on their report card, they don't have to do chores for a week, right? Maybe you have a teacher who says if you get an A on the test, you don't have to do this extra worksheet that some students have to do. In those cases, you're taking something away, again, to increase behavior. So that's going to be negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement confuses a lot of students because it sounds like something you want to avoid. But remember, reinforcement is usually something good. We're strengthening behavior. So negative reinforcement is often something that we do seek out. Punishment, we're trying to decrease something that is undesirable. And so maybe you have a situation where a student has a lot of missing assignments. And because that student has a lot of missing assignments, their parents take away their cell phone. Well, they're taking something away, which makes it negative because they're trying to reduce the target behavior of missing assignments. So that's going to be negative punishment. Or maybe the student who has a lot of missing assignments, the parents make them do an extra 30 minutes of math work every night until they pull up their grade. Now they're adding something undesirable, that extra work, to try to decrease the behavior of not turning work in. So in that case, it'd be positive punishment. And then the last slide is really just looking at, well, how often should we reinforce? If you reinforce every single time someone does something, this is what we call a continuous schedule or a continuous reinforcement. That is, every single time someone makes an action, it is reinforced. Then we have 4 different types of what's called partial reinforcement. And so you can see these are right here. These 4 boxes all look at not reinforcing every single time, but using a variety of different schedules. And just like our previous slide, we have 2 questions you can ask yourself. The first question, are you reinforcing based off of time, or are you reinforcing based off of action? If you are reinforcing someone for no other reason than time has passed, Maybe you're working at a restaurant and you simply get paid by the hour. You're working at a grocery store or retail and you get paid by the hour. If you're getting reinforced based off of time, we call those interval schedules. And those are going to be found on this bottom row. And if you're getting reinforced based off of action, like maybe you're reinforced by the number of lawns that you mow, or you're reinforced by the number of paintings that you sell. If there's some action that has to be done, those are what we call ratio schedules. And so that's going to be this middle row right here. The second question, is the reinforcement consistent or is it random? If you get paid on a consistent schedule, meaning you know when to anticipate the payday, when to anticipate getting the reinforcement, whatever it may be, then we call those fixed schedules. Whereas if you don't know, if when that reinforcement is coming is unknown, if it's unpredictable, if it's random, then we'd call those variable schedules. And just like the previous slide, we just create combinations based off the answers of those two questions. Really common reinforcement schedules would be things like fixed intervals. If you get paid $10 an hour, it's consistent and it's based off of time. It's a fixed interval. If you get paid for every, let's say, every 5 lawns that you mow or every 10 pairs of jeans that you sell, that's a fixed ratio. You got to do something. You have to sell something, but it's consistent. Slot machines, those are random, and you don't know when it's going to happen, but you have to do something. You have to put coins in the slot machine. So the fact that it's random means that it's variable, and you have to do something means it's a ratio. So slot machines are a variable ratio. And then that last one in the bottom corner, variable interval, those are not very common schedules because they don't work really well. You can think of it perhaps something like a pop quiz where time goes by, you don't have to do anything other than be present, and then all of a sudden here's the reinforcement, if you want to think of it that way. So variable interval schedules, not very common ways to try to reinforce behaviors. So I hope that's helpful with operant conditioning. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and good luck.